Darfur is a region of western Sudan. Dar is an Arabic word meaning home of. The region was named Dardaju while ruled by the Daju, who migrated from Meroë c. 350 AD, and it was renamed Dartunjur when the Tunjur ruled the area. Darfur was an independent sultanate for several hundred years until 1874, when it fell to the Sudanese warlord Rabih az-Zubayr. The region was later invaded and incorporated into Sudan by Anglo-Egyptian forces in 1916. As an administrative region, Darfur is divided into 5 federal states: Central Darfur, East Darfur, North Darfur, South Darfur, and West Darfur. Because of the war in Darfur between Sudanese government forces and the indigenous population, the region has been in a state of humanitarian emergency and genocide since 2003. The factors include religious and ethnic rivalry, and the rivalry between farmers and herders. Darfur covers an area of 493,180 square kilometers, 190,420 square miles, approximately the size of mainland Spain. It is largely a semi-desert plateau with the Meroë Mountains, Jebel Mara, a range of volcanic peaks rising up to 3,042 meters, 9,980 feet, of elevation above sea level, and a topographic prominence of 2,512 m, in the center of the region. The region's main towns are Al-Fashir, Jenaina, and Nyala. There are 4 main features of its physical geography. The whole eastern half of Darfur is covered with plains and low hills of sandy soils, known as Gaz, and sandstone hills. In many places the Gaz is waterless and can only be inhabited where there are water reservoirs or deep boreholes. While dry, Gaz may also support rich pasture and arable land. To the north the Gaz is overtaken by the desert sands of the Sahara. A second feature are the wadis, which range from seasonal watercourses that flood only occasionally during the wet season to large wadis that flood for most of the rains and flow from western Darfur hundreds of kilometers west to Lake Chad. Many wadis have pans of alluvium with rich heavy soil that are also difficult to cultivate. Western Darfur is dominated by the third feature, basement rock, sometimes covered with a thin layer of sandy soil. Basement rock is too infertile to be farmed, but provides sporadic forest cover that can be grazed by animals. The fourth and final feature are the Meroë Mountains and Daju Hills, volcanic plugs created by a massif, that rise up to a peak at Dardaju crater where there is a small area of temperate climate, high rainfall, and permanent springs of water. Remote sensing has detected the imprint of a vast underground lake under Darfur. The potential water deposits are estimated at 49,500 square kilometers, 19,110 square miles. The lake, during epochs when the region was more humid, would have contained about 2,500 cubic kilometers, 600 cubic miles, of water. It may have dried up thousands of years ago. Ethnic tensions, long simmering between nomadic Arab herders and sedentary fur and other agriculturalists, began erupting into armed conflict in the late 1980s. The violence, although bloody, generally was sporadic until 2003, when rebels from among the agriculturalists attacked government installations to protest what they contended was the Sudanese government's disregard for the western region and its non-Arab population. The government in Khartoum responded by creating an Arab militia force which came to be known as Janjaweed, also Jingaid or Janjaweed, that began attacking the sedentary groups in Darfur. Within a year, tens of thousands of people, primarily fur and other agriculturalists, had been killed, and hundreds of thousands had fled westward to refugee camps in neighboring Chad. Many others remained internally displaced. Despite a 2004 ceasefire and the presence of African Union, troops that followed, by 2007 the conflict and resulting humanitarian crisis had grown, leaving hundreds of thousands of people dead and more than 2 million displaced. On July 31, 2007, the United Nations Security Council authorized a joint UNO peacekeeping mission, UNAMID, to replace the O mission, although UNAMID troop deployment did not begin until 2008. In July 2008 an International Criminal Court, ICC, prosecutors sought a warrant for the arrest of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, alleging that he bore criminal responsibility for the crisis in Darfur and accusing him of orchestrating the genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity occurring in the region. The Sudanese government rejected the allegations and proclaimed Bashir's innocence. On March 4, 2009, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Bashir, charging him with war crimes and crimes against humanity but not with genocide. A second warrant for that charge was later issued on July 12, 2010. In spite of the presence of unarmed troops, conflict in Darfur was not eliminated. It intensified after the Sudanese government launched its decisive summer military campaign against rebellions throughout the country beginning in late 2013. The campaign, which reached Darfur in 2014, saw the use of a new government security unit known as the Rapid Support Force, RSF, which many compared to the Janjaweed in terms of lawlessness of tactics, perhaps not surprising, since the RSF appeared to have many former Janjaweed fighters among its ranks. In 2014 the UN noted that more than 3,000 villages in Darfur had been burned to the ground, and widespread sexual violence against Darfur civilians was reported. The ongoing conflict led to a worsening humanitarian crisis, which was further exacerbated by the Sudanese government's restrictions on humanitarian aid groups. A pattern of skewed economic development continued after Sudan achieved political independence in 1956. The governor at the time of independence was Ali Abdullah Abu Sin, who had joined the civil service in 1923 and served in Darfur since 1946. In August 1958 he was succeeded by Ahmed Maki Abdo, who remained in power despite the coup d'état of that year, until he was finally dismissed in December 1959 and replaced by Al-Tijani Essaid. The proxy wars between Sudan, Libya, and Chad added an element of political instability. Darfurians began to respond to the ideology of Arab supremacy propagated by Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi, in power 1969 to 2011. A famine in the mid-1980s disrupted many societal structures and led to the first significant modern fighting amongst Darfuris. A low-level conflict continued for the next 15 years, with the government co-opting and arming Arab Janjaweed militias against its enemies. The fighting reached a peak in 2003 with the beginning of the Darfur conflict, in which the resistance coalesced into a roughly cohesive rebel movement. In March 2004, human rights groups and the UN came to regard the conflict as one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the world. Insurgency and counterinsurgency have led to 480,000 deaths. The Khartoum government disputes the numbers. This has been labeled as the Darfur genocide. By 2010 about 300,000 had died, according to the UN best estimate, and about 3 million were forced into refugee camps. Over 2.8 million people have become displaced since 2003, many of whom were children. See Lost Boys of Sudan. Many of these refugees have gone into camps where emergency aid has created conditions that, although extremely basic, are better than in the villages, which offer no protection against the various militias that operate in the region. Nearly two-thirds of the population continues to struggle to survive in remote villages. Virtually no foreigners visit the region because of the fear of kidnapping, and only some non-governmental organizations continue to provide long-term grassroots assistance. As of 2015, the United Nations is in discussion with the government of Sudan over the withdrawal of UNAMID, the peacekeeping force, which is the largest in the world. Other UN agencies, such as the WFP, might exit. During the existence of the Calais Jungle refugee camp, Darfur was listed as a major source of the camp's inhabitants. Peace process. Darfur Peace Agreement, also known as Abuja Agreement. The government of Sudan and the Sudan Liberation Movement of Meroë signed a Darfur Peace Agreement in 2006. Only one rebel group, the Sudan Liberation Movement, subscribed to the agreement. The Justice and Equality Movement rejected it, resulting in a continuation of the conflict. The agreement includes provisions for wealth sharing and power sharing and established a transitional Darfur Regional Authority to help administer Darfur until a referendum could take place on the future of the region. The leader of the Sudan Liberation Movement, Meroë, was appointed senior assistant to the President of Sudan and chairman of the Transitional Authority in 2007. Doha Agreement. In December 2010, representatives of the Liberation and Justice Movement, an umbrella organization of 10 rebel groups, formed in February of that year, started a fresh round of talks with the Sudanese government in Doha, Qatar. A new rebel group, the Sudanese Alliance Resistance Forces in Darfur, was formed and the Justice and Equality Movement planned further talks. The talks ended on December 19 without a new peace agreement, but participants agreed on basic principles, including a regional authority and a referendum on autonomy for Darfur. The possibility of a Darfuri vice president was also discussed. In January 2011, the leader of the Liberation and Justice Movement, Dr. Tijani Sisi, stated that the movement had accepted the core proposals of the Darfur peace document proposed by the joint mediators in Doha. The proposals included a $300 million compensation package for victims of atrocities in Darfur and special courts to conduct trials of persons accused of human rights violations. Proposals for a new Darfur Regional Authority were also included. This authority would have an executive council of 18 ministers and would remain in place for 5 years. The current 3 Darfur states and state governments would also continue to exist during this period. In February 2011, the Sudanese government rejected the idea of a single region headed by a vice president from the region. On January 29, the leaders of the Liberation and Justice Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement issued a joint statement affirming their commitment to the Doha negotiations and agreement to attend the Doha Forum on February 5. The Sudanese government had not yet agreed to attend the forum on that date and instead favored an internal peace process without the involvement of rebel groups. Later in February, the Sudanese government agreed to return to the Doha Peace Forum with a view to complete a new peace agreement by the end of that month. On February 25, both the Liberation and Justice Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement announced that they had rejected the peace document proposed by the mediators in Doha. The main sticking points were the issues of a Darfuri vice president and compensation for victims. The Sudanese government had not commented on the peace document. At the Doha Peace Forum in June, the joint mediators proposed a new Darfur peace agreement, which would supersede the Abuja Agreement of 2005 and if signed, would halt preparations for a Darfur status referendum. The proposal included provisions for a Darfuri vice president and an administrative structure that includes both the 3 states and a strategic regional authority, the Darfur Regional Authority, to oversee Darfur as a whole. The new agreement was signed by the government of Sudan and the Liberation and Justice Movement on July 14. The Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement did not sign the new document at that time but had 3 months in which to do so if they wished. 2020 Peace Agreement, Juba Agreement. The Juba Agreement was signed on August 31, 2020 in Juba, South Sudan, between the Sudanese authorities and rebel factions to end armed hostilities. However, further tribal clashes had continued during 2021. During the Sudanese Civil War, there has been considerable fighting in the Darfur region. This includes the Mausalat massacres perpetuated by the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, causing some analysts to declare a genocide in Sudan. The Darfur Peace Agreement of 2006 established a transitional Darfur Regional Authority as an interim authority for the region. The agreement stated that a referendum on the status of Darfur should be held no later than 2011. Meroë was the first chair of this authority, holding that office from April 2007 until December 2010, when he was succeeded by Sharda Jafar Abdel Hakam. The peace agreement that was signed in July 2011 saw the transitional Darfur Regional Authority reconstituted as the Darfur Regional Authority with executive and legislative functions. The chairperson of the Darfur Regional Authority, Tijani Sisi, assumed the post on September 20, 2011. The regional authority was dissolved in July 2016 following a referendum on the status of the Darfur region within Sudan. As part of the Sudanese transition to democracy, a Darfur regional government was re-established in August 2021 with Meroë as regional governor. Thank you for watching this video.